Ladies and gentlemen, I want to read you a recent headline pertaining to Matt Gaetz as a special prosecutor in an upcoming special counsel. Jesse Waters suggests a special prosecutor role for Matt Gaetz. This is a recent headline from a very respected liberal publication or political action committee. I'm not exactly sure how you would label them. But there is talk, not just this article, there's talk about Matt Gaetz and his future within a special counsel directed and created by Trump's Attorney General, Pam Bondi. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. You're going to hear the legal analysis in a second. I'm going to give you a quick summary or a quick recap of what will happen within the next year. So people are already talking, number one, about Matt Gaetz being part of a special counsel or numerous special counsels once President Trump takes office January 20th. Pam Bondi is going to easily be confirmed. And they're more frightened of Pam Bondi than they are of Matt Gaetz for a number of reasons. But number one, Attorney General Pam Bondi, within the next year, probably 4 or 5, within the next 2-3 months, okay, by February or March, we'll have a special counsel or numerous special counsels. Number two, Matt Gaetz will likely be either a special prosecutor or helping lead the special counsels. This is according to the latest article. There are other reports as well. Okay, Jesse Waters suggests a special counsel, special prosecutor role for Matt Gaetz. Number three, it's not revenge or retribution, and you'll hear the legal analysis in a second. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. I have been telling you Trump was going to win in 2024. I have been telling you that every single Supreme Court victory he will get. Now I'm telling you there will be special counsels, or the other option is simply indictments because John Ratcliffe is at Central Intelligence. You have Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence. You have Attorney General Pam Bondi. And then you have likely, almost certainly, a new Federal Bureau of Investigation Director upcoming. So they're all going to work to declassify information. So number 3 or 4, they're going to declassify information that was classified likely to protect people who are possibly committing crimes. Number 5, if a person, if a government official, if a Democratic Party operative or lawyer or former agent or government official went after Trump and they did so illegally, if they broke the law to indict and imprison Biden's direct political rival, they themselves will be indicted. This is not retribution. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. President Trump is the president, according to the Constitution, leader of the executive branch. Guess what's part of the executive branch? The Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Department of Justice, and every special counsel. That's why Jack Smith, that's why essentially he's going to terminate any involvement by Biden's attorneys, DOJ, and Jack Smith's special counsel. They'll all get fired. Hit subscribe right now. This is huge news.
The Washington Post reports that President-elect Trump plans to fire the entire team that worked under special counsel Jack Smith at the Justice Department. Those DOJ employees worked on 2 federal prosecutions against the incoming president. The report adds that Trump is planning to assemble teams within the department to investigate this as we move forward. More on the President-elect Trump's plans for the Justice Department in particular. We are joined by former federal prosecutor Andrew Cherkasky. Thank you so much for giving us a little time on this Saturday afternoon, Andrew. We greatly appreciate it. Kicking things off with just the first start, the idea that an entire team might be fired. Now, it's not unusual for an incoming president, incoming administration to bring in new people, new teams, particularly when legal concerns are made, AGs all across the nation. Your thoughts on this particular headline?
By the way, once they remove the Jack Smith special counsel and everyone involved in it, they will either begin a special counsel or just simply indict people based on John Ratcliffe and every other intel chief that Trump has nominated or will nominate declassifying information. A lot of the, like, for example, the phones of the Mueller probe, they had an update and were wiped clean. Well, there's a record of that, almost certainly. Okay? And it doesn't take much for John Ratcliffe or the next National Security Agency chief to find the record of whatever it is they tried to erase. That being said, the special counsel is part of the executive branch. The Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, they're all part of the executive branch. President Trump can fire anyone he wants, and that not only has already been upheld, but that's within the Constitution. So yet again, if Democrats want to go after him, the Supreme Court would make it precedent, just like they did with presidential immunity. So Democrats tried to weaken Trump. They went after him, and then the Supreme Court said, actually, he has presidential immunity. You can't try to indict and imprison him because of a speech, because of this absurd, irrational leap of logic that says, well, he performed a speech, therefore people he didn't know committed crimes. So they actually strengthened the office of the presidency and made Trump stronger with the immunity issue. And by the way, the imbeciles telling you that Trump or any other president can, let's say, terminate their direct political rivals, that's nonsense. This is for official acts like performing a speech or legislation or speaking to any political ally anywhere in the country. This is protected by the Constitution. What Democrats did is they said, well, Trump was speaking to people, and Trump performed a speech, and this and that. And they tried to use the 18 U.S. Code 371 statute, which will be leveled against them.
Well, when you look at the people who worked under Jack Smith, you have to think about the credibility of the actions that they brought. First, we have an election that just strongly communicated that the American public vehemently disagrees with what Jack Smith had done over the last 4 years. But then you have to look at the fact that these attorneys working under Jack Smith were pushing a novel legal issue that failed at almost every turn, to include as it went up to the Supreme Court. So if those are the attorneys that were working there, does Donald Trump really want those attorneys to continue in the DOJ? And so I think it's absolutely appropriate to be thinking about and talking about the idea that those folks may be well suited to leave the DOJ. We're not talking criminal prosecutions of those folks, but I think the idea of seeing them out the door is probably wise.
And now shifting gears just a little bit to the AG pick, Bondi. This is a big pick, a Trump loyalist, someone that he has a lot of confidence in, as one would expect. But there's also some criticism coming down. Here's Ellie Honig. She is the former assistant U.S. attorney out of the Southern District of New York.
They say loyalist, but the reality is it was Eric Holder and Merrick Garland who were held in contempt of Congress. You couldn't get greater loyalists than Democratic Party attorney generals.
Talking about Bondi's pick.
There's nothing wrong or unusual with an attorney general who shares the same politics and ideology as the president. That's the way these things work. But I think the big problem with Pam Bondi is she was about her independence in front of the Senate.
So he's sitting on something that is also covered in that Washington Post article about President Trump looking back at the 2020 election and seeking answers. Your thought on the president picking Bondi, and what also his focus potentially on looking back at that 2020 election?
Well, Pam Bondi gives President Trump really everything that he was hoping to get from Matt Gaetz, plus much more. Her credibility as a very effective AG in the state of Florida, which has particularly MAGA-type politics, and she's proven herself effective. Matt Gaetz had not run a similar office, so I think that she really is a stronger pick to be able to perpetuate the policies and the ideas that Donald Trump has for the DOJ. As for the criticism of her, I mean, if you want to go back and continue to...
Andrew, I'm so sorry. We are...
So we have Pam Bondi leading special counsels very soon. Jack Smith everything they tried to do against Trump led to Trump winning the popular vote, the Senate, the House, the every battleground state, the presidency, and he has the Supreme Court. So not only was Trump not guilty, but the entire planet knew they were trying to make up very novel, absurd legal theories simply to get Trump. And everyone knew this also. This isn't like rocket science.
Counsel Jack Smith says he plans to retire before Trump takes office. Elliot Feelig is a former prosecutor for the Manhattan DA, joining me now. Elliot, it seems like Trump's cases are just going away.
The Jack Smith experience ends not with a bang, but with a whimper. He came out of the same office I did, the Manhattan DA's office, having talked to former colleagues who worked with him, knowing how competitive and how driven he is. It's got to hurt.
I just made the comment that lawfare, that's the use of the courts to oppose a political opponent, I think it's a gross failure, and I think it's a disgrace. What will you say?
Well, when the indictments were coming one after another in 2023, one of the questions we contemplated was, how much is this going to hurt Trump as he seeks the nomination? He was being challenged by DeSantis and Nikki Haley. How much would it hurt him in a general election? In retrospect, we should have been asking, is it going to hurt him at all? I think in retrospect, it helped him. He got a fundraising injection every time he got indicted. And looking at the election results, it helped him.
It absolutely helped him because everyone knew that he didn't commit a crime. People know that the same prosecutors, the same officials that accused Trump of committing criminal acts, they themselves might have committed crimes in trying to twist and contort the law. So what they did was accuse Trump of being a Kremlin operative. Then they said he committed a felony with hush money payments. But the DOJ dropped the case. The FEC dropped the case. Former FEC chairman stated Trump could have paid Stormy with dollar bills. It would not have been a campaign finance issue or even a fine. It was Democrats, the DNC, and Clinton's campaign that paid a fine because of the Steele dossier, for purchasing the Steele dossier. So nothing worked. Now he won the popular vote because the electorate wants to see the same people who went after Trump. They want to see if people broke the law, okay? You have numerous individuals who obviously broke the law, either perjury or withholding, or 18 U.S. Code 371, the statute that they tried to utilize against Trump. They knew Trump wasn't an operative of the Kremlin. They knew this. There was not a shred of evidence. You have to be an imbecile to think that Trump was an operative of the Kremlin. They knew that, yet they still pushed a McCarthy-era Red Scare lie. That is against the law to do that. You can't just simply accuse an incoming president of working for another country, and then you say you have intelligence when there's no intelligence. Well, now Trump has the intelligence agencies as part of his administration. He never really did before. You can't simply say Trump committed hush money felonies by ignoring the statute of limitations that ran out on misdemeanors and then elevating the misdemeanors in New York to felonies with an imaginary federal crime that Biden's own Department of Justice never leveled against Trump. Then did people collude against Trump? Were there state prosecutors speaking with the Democratic Party or Biden's administration? Of course there were, almost certainly. You don't need a signed letter saying we are going to imprison our direct political rivals, signed state and federal Democrats. You don't need that. It's obvious what was taking place. Again, you have to be completely stupid not to realize that state and federal officials who were either Democrats or operatives or lawyers or people working somehow with the Democratic Party, along with media, by the way, knew Trump was innocent, knew he wasn't a Kremlin operative, knew he didn't commit hush money or whatever in Georgia and in Florida. They knew he didn't commit any classified data breaches. In fact, federal agents allegedly tampered with evidence just to make it seem that he had all these top secret files. They brought the files with the name top secret on them, okay? And he had the power to declassify anything. And he could have done so verbally as well. Clinton and Biden did not have the power to do so. Big difference.
What about this the hush money case?
Right.
It's been paused. That means what's with that?
It's in a state of limbo. The judge still has to decide first the motion to dismiss based on the Supreme Court's immunity decision. I don't know if he's going to go ahead with that decision. The Trump team has to decide, though, because they have significant legitimate appellate issues, but an appeal cannot go forward until judgment is formally entered with the pronunciation of a sentence. So they don't get to argue the appeal if everyone agrees to pause it. So it gets put in limbo unless there's a motion to dismiss in the interest of justice, which I don't think would be granted unless the DA consented. I don't think the DA would consent to that.
So it just hangs around. It just hangs there for as long as it takes.
Unless the Trump team chooses.
John, thank you for the kind words. Everybody, thank you for the kind words. Let's continue. To my super chat also, thank you.
Is to allow him to pronounce a sentence. The sentence would not be imposed. It would be stayed pending appeal. But the only way you can get that appeal to be heard is if the sentence is at least announced.
Is there something special about the Georgia case that we should know?
I mean, the Georgia case was already a total mess. It was already looking at years of backup because they haven't even begun to consider the immunity decision impact. They're still deciding whether Fani Willis has to be removed from the case. So even if Trump had lost, it would have been years before that goes to trial. Now, all of that gets put on hold. And are you really going to restart the clock with years of potential litigation when he's an 83-year-old former president?
Let's wrap this up.
He never committed a crime anywhere in the country. This is why, setting up Trump is an actual crime. If you are President Obama and you're his intelligence chiefs, or you're his Department of Justice, or your agents for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and you utilize a dossier purchased by Clinton and the DNC that eventually break campaign finance laws where they're actually fined, only Trump would be convicted of a campaign finance issue when he didn't commit a campaign finance crime. Even Biden's DOJ stated he didn't commit a campaign finance crime, but he was convicted in New York because they elevated misdemeanors to a felony somehow with an imaginary federal crime. That's totally unconstitutional. When it goes to the Supreme Court, it'll be overturned. But Trump did not do anything in Georgia or in Florida or in D.C. He had every right to speak to any Republican anywhere. They were trying to say that because he spoke to Republicans to voice his concerns regarding 4 years ago, he broke the law. Why? Because under 18 U.S. Code 371 and other statutes, he knew he was lying. Trump, not for a second did he ever think that Biden defeated him in a manner that was above board, let's say. Not for 1 second. Trump isn't Bernie Sanders that says, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, I love you. Everything that you've done for me, I love you so much. And Democrats and the Kremlin, if you're listening, I don't want your help. And Trump is a big menace to democracy. And meanwhile, we had record low poverty, which is the one reason we had record low poverty. And he's the most anti-war president we've had in decades or whatever, like generations. And so that's why I used to be the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet, according to the Huffington Post. And I used to be the unofficial scribe of Sanders' most hardcore voters, according to the Washington Post. Well, I was basically completely delusional when it came to politics. I thought that Bernie Sanders was Trump. I thought that Bernie Sanders would be against endless wars and bring about record low poverty. That's Trump. That's how you go from Bernie 2016 to Trump 2024. And I've been supporting President Trump for like 7 years now, 8 years. So, 7 years. So, people say, well, how do you go from Bernie to Trump? Well, because if you don't know much about politics and you don't understand that foreign policy, if you want to end never-ending military conflict, that's your most important concern, which is should be everyone's most important concern, preventing nuclear confrontation, then it's a moral imperative to vote for Trump. If you are a morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrat, and you think the atrocities taking place at the southern geographic region of our country, the border, you don't think that's a moral issue to ensure that we have a functioning border? You don't think it's a moral issue to prevent, the end of the world with a nuclear confrontation, and you don't go to Thanksgiving and Christmas and you want to disown friends and family? You lack knowledge. You lack knowledge about history. Trump is the least authoritarian president. He signed prison reform legislation. He's against invasions. What more? And he presided over record low poverty. Okay, and he supports. We can go on forever. Authoritarians aren't known for signing prison reform legislation or being against perpetual military conflicts. But anyway, let's continue.
Let's bring in our own legal eagle, if you don't mind me calling her that. Her name is Shannon Bream, and she's on the right-hand side of the screen. All right, Shannon, in your judgment, right now, does Gates get confirmed?
He's got an uphill battle when you have members of your own party saying, ooh, I got to think about this, or that.
So Shannon Bream here is brilliant. She actually predicts that Matt Gaetz will eventually become part of a special counsel or some other important position in Trump's administration, going after the people who went after Trump, which is not retribution. It's actually making sure that people didn't break the law in trying to imprison their direct political rivals. But anyway, she actually says Trump probably picked Gaetz simply to frighten everybody and then make it much easier for Pam Bondi to become AG.
That's a shock. Or you did have Lindsey Graham, though, saying today, I voted for a lot of people I didn't like. So that leaves a lot of room open for where his vote may go. But listen, it's a tough vetting process to get through judiciary and get to the floor. And, my first thought was yesterday when this was floated or announced by President-elect Trump, I thought, okay, he is putting Matt Gaetz out there, knowing he's got a really difficult road forward. Maybe he's got a different AG pick, and he says, okay, you were shocked by the Matt Gaetz pick. That didn't work. Here's who I'm really picking. Maybe somebody that would have been a little bit shocking had it been the first person he picked, but seems more palatable to Capitol Hill if Gaetz doesn't get through. But there are a lot of steps, and it's sparking this talk, too, from President-elect Trump. As you know, he asked all of the GOP Senate majority candidates to commit to this idea of recess appointments, and maybe that's exactly what he has in mind for Matt Gaetz.
Gaetz, if he becomes Attorney General, the belief is that he would go after the Justice Department. Wouldn't that be a form of retribution?
It's not a form of retribution if people committed crimes while they were trying to imprison Trump. Okay? You have Democratic Party prosecutors in New York, for example, who ran on convicting Trump. They actually ran on it. The Attorney General ran on the platform of imprisoning Trump. Then they say, oh my God, Trump, he's an authoritarian. Like, you have people who ran on imprisoning Trump, but they're not authoritarian. They're completely independent.
Yeah, that's exactly what President Trump's critics have said. They're worried about him going after enemies and using lawfare and doing the things he says have been done against him. And they see Matt Gaetz very much as the face of somebody who would do that. Now, the President-elect has said, success is going to be my revenge. I want everybody to do well. I want us to move forward. But he also has had very specific language about the DOJ, about the mistreatment he believes he's been subject to for years. And he wants somebody to clean out the DOJ. And so I think dropping the name Matt Gaetz yesterday sent shockwaves through the Justice Department and beyond here in D.C.
Well, he sure did. A ripple effect was there was a tsunami of reaction to that. Next one, Shannon. Special Counsel Jack Smith, he's asked an appeals court to halt his appeal against Donald Trump for the alleged mishandling of classified documents. Look, it's very complicated, but it seems to me that the lawfare against Trump is just falling apart completely. Is it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think these federal cases, Jack Smith knows that they're sort of on a dead end at this point. So while yesterday, that Mar-a-Lago documents case, which is on appeal to the 11th Circuit, just that one step below the Supreme Court, while he didn't say we're ready to throw out the case, he did say, let's put this case on hold. It's pretty much the same thing he's done with the D.C. case, the January 6th federal case.
If Trump was guilty, it would have taken 2 seconds for him to be found to convict him. He wasn't guilty of anything. That's why the Supreme Court had to rule in his favor on presidential immunity, because they made such absurd, Democrats made such absurd, nonsensical, irrational leaps of logic. Trump was speaking to people in a speech in January. Therefore, he caused people to commit crimes. And he also spoke to people in Georgia. He also spoke to others in D.C. Therefore, he was guilty of racketeering because he spoke to allies. And he knew he was lying because everyone knows that Biden won. He was the most popular candidate of all time. It just so happened that, 10 plus million Democrats didn't show up in 24. Lord knows why. But anyway, everything was very bizarre. So with Democrats, they say whenever their indignation is infused within politics, they legislate based on their sensibilities. They govern based on their sensibilities. And then they indict based on their sensibilities. Read the indictments. They read like MSNBC scripts. Trump knew he was lying, and he was speaking to other people to lie on his behalf. He didn't know he was lying. Never, even for 1 second, did he ever think that he lost truly in a fair manner. Okay, he thought that they treated him like Bernie Sanders. The way Bernie Sanders was railroaded. Actually, what happened to Biden was even worse than Bernie Sanders. They ousted and removed Biden, who was the most popular candidate of all time, which lends credibility to everything Trump was trying to communicate. But not for 1 second did Trump ever believe he was lying to people. And the Supreme Court stated, yeah, he's allowed to speak his mind. Whether or not Democrats think that he's speaking falsehoods, he's allowed to speak his mind. Democrats literally made the office of the presidency stronger because everything they do against Trump backfires. Nothing ever works. Now, nobody trusts media. Nobody cares about Hollywood. The Democrats lost in this monumental fashion. They're going to lose 4 years from now to J.D. Vance. They have nobody on deck. And now Trump with Matt Gaetz and Pam Bondi and John Ratcliffe and the new Federal Bureau of Investigation director. And people are going to get indicted, but they'll get imprisoned almost certainly also. They'll get prison sentences because when trying to go up against Trump and imprison him, they broke the law almost certainly. They created all these very bizarre legal theories and withheld exculpatory evidence. And they did that with the January defendants as well. That's why with the Tucker Carlson footage, people were acquitted because doors were open for people. And then still you have Democrats saying he tried to foment rebellion. I mean, this is like they would just believe fantasies and lies. And then they wonder why Trump won the popular vote.
And so it's very much a signaling that this is kind of the beginning of the end for those federal cases they'll be winding down.
The last one for you, Shannon. The Republicans hold the House. That's the news. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says it's his fault. He takes responsibility. So, Shannon, what happens now?
Well, the Republicans have probably a very tiny majority, which has been, like herding cats, we say on Capitol Hill. It comes with its own headaches, but Republicans are relieved to be in charge, even if they know it's going to be a tight minority or majority. And of course, President Trump has selected some people he thinks are very talented, pulling them out of the House GOP. Those special elections will have to happen. So it gives an even tighter margin for Speaker Johnson, who's going to continue in that role. But interesting that, the top Democrat in the House, Congressman Jeffries.
So this is really interesting. We'll listen to Matt Gaetz grill the Attorney General who was held in contempt of Congress. So Merrick Garland was held in contempt of Congress. And he was held in contempt of Congress because he did not give the audio recordings or the transcripts of the audio recordings of Biden's special counsel, which was never meant to indict him and convict him. The classified data that Clinton, for example, had on private servers, there is no way for a Secretary of State, number one, to declassify anything. Number two, top secret intel was transferred, almost certainly illegally. It's impossible to transfer classified data legally onto a secret private server. Nobody knows how that happened. That alone is like a endless list of felonies. But then with Biden, it might have been even worse than Clinton. Biden had classified data in his garage. Biden had classified data possibly at a university. According to Ted Cruz, Hunter summarized classified data to facilitate business deals. So, and as senator, he had no power to declassify. As vice president, he doesn't really have the ability to declassify. So, anyway, let's continue.
To allege that the Department of Justice is communicating with these state and local prosecutions against Trump, you can clear it all up for us right now. Will the Department of Justice provide to the committee all documents, all correspondence between the department and Alvin Bragg's office and Fonnie Willis's office and Letitia James's office?
The offices you're referring to are independent offices of state.
I get that. I get that.
State.
The question is whether or not you will provide all of your documents and correspondence. That's the question. I don't need a history lesson.
Well, I'm going to say again, we do not control those offices. They make their own decisions.
The question is whether you communicate with them, not whether you control them. Do you communicate with them?
So notice the doublespeak here. We don't communicate with these Democratic Party elected officials who happen to do everything possible in unison with the federal government to undermine Trump. These Democrats in these Democratic-run cities or in blue states and blue cities they're not controlled by us, and they're completely independent. Well, then why did they all in unison go after Trump? They're all Democrats. They're in unison going after Trump, and they all did the same things, which is twist and mangle and contort legal theories to just try to get him, which is why he's not imprisoned now. If Trump was guilty of anything, he would have been imprisoned a long time ago. He even had Republicans after him. So the doublespeak is we don't control them. No, but do you communicate? Oh, well, you can go ahead and ask the office liaison for media affairs. They are never going to answer the question. Of course, they don't control. Whether they communicate is another story, but it's an overt attempt by Democrats on the state level to coincide, to work in conjunction with Democrats on a federal level to get Trump, to go after their direct political rivals, like authoritarians. But when Democrats act in a totalitarian manner, they do so above board, in a civil, presidential, and honorable manner.
I get that. I get that.
State
the question
is you're referring to,
and Alvin Bragg's office and Fonnie Willis's office and Letitia James's office.
the offices you're referring to are independent offices of state.
I get that. I get that.
State.
The question is whether or not you will provide all of your documents and correspondence. That's the question. I don't need a history lesson.
Well, I'm going to say again, we do not control those offices. They make their own decisions.
The question is whether you communicate with them, not whether you control them. Do you communicate with them, and will you provide those communications?
If you make a request, we'll refer it to our Office of Legislative Affairs.
But see, here's the thing. You come in here and you lodge this attack that it's a conspiracy theory, that there is coordinated lawfare against Trump. And then when we say, fine, just give us the documents, give us the correspondence, and then if it's a conspiracy theory, that will be evident. But when you say, well, we'll take your request, and then we'll sort of work it through the DOJ's accommodation process, then you're actually advancing the very dangerous conspiracy theory that you're concerned about. Now, you were a judge, once nominated to the highest court in our country. When you were a judge, I'm just curious, did you ever make political donations to partisan candidates?
No.
No, and you didn't, because that would create the potential appearance of impropriety.
I didn't, because there's a federal rule barring federal judges from making contributions.
Right, but under that.
Why is it okay for the courts that went after Trump to have made contributions to Democrats or to Biden, or to be linked to political action committees? If Trump just he doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to indict any former bureau official. If he just investigates the funding, the labyrinth, the Byzantine labyrinth, the endless, maze of shady funding. I mean, you had, what's his name? The crypto Ponzi scheme. What's his name? Oh Lord. He was the second largest donor years back to Democrat 2022. Okay? FTX. Sam Bankman-Fried. If you just go and look at the political action committees and the nonpartisan, totally partisan watchdogs, you'd get very likely an endless list of indictments. It's the funding alone is so shady.
Same theory of attacks on the judicial process. Like, shouldn't someone be owed like a jury of their peers and a judge that's non-biased rather than getting a judge from your political opponent's donor file?
Well, I'm well aware that you're not asking a hypothetical. You're asking me to comment on a jury verdict in another jurisdiction which has to be respected.
It's another jurisdiction. It happens to be in New York. It's completely apolitical. Tammany Hall in New York, run by Democrats, overwhelmingly, the Democratic Party has an overwhelming foothold, a complete domination of politics in New York, but it's completely independent. Completely independent. They actually fined Trump for inflating his net worth when there was nobody that complained about his net worth being a part of any loan. In fact, Deutsche Bank would loan him another $1 billion. He could get $1 billion loan tomorrow. Actually, he got $1 billion loan like a couple years back when he was being indicted left and right. Trump could get a loan tomorrow for $1 billion. Yet in New York, he was indicted, or no, he was fined. And then they said Mar-a-Lago was worth $17 million. They used a tax assessment. Then they lie by omission all the time. Well, Mar-a-Lago wasn't. We didn't say that Mar-a-Lago was 17 million. We just used the tax. Well, why did you use the tax assessment? Why don't you just go call a real estate agent? It's $1 billion plus. One of the golf carts is probably $1 million. I'm joking, but it's like it's easily $1 billion. But then again, I mean, look, this is why he won in a it was really a landslide.
I won't comment on it. That case is, again, it's very clear you're asking me to comment on a case in another jurisdiction.
No, wait, hold on, Mr. Attorney General. Did you ever have a family member profit off of the notoriety?
I'm not going to comment on it.
Okay, so you won't comment on it, Mr. Attorney General, but you had no problem dispatching Matthew Colangelo. Who's Matthew Colangelo?
That is false. I did not dispatch Matthew Colangelo.
I did not dispatch. We don't control. You can ask the Office of Media Relations Liaison, send a handwritten note with a stamp to P.O. Box, and then we'll get back to you. The Democratic Party, and this man was held in contempt of Congress. The Democratic Party resides within semantic murkiness. They don't dispatch a top DOJ official to work in New York, but it happened. They don't control Democratic prosecutors in numerous states, but that happened. So, what's the word? These things happen just purely by chance. Okay, then the question now is, why do they happen purely by chance? And if the tables were reversed, CNN, MSNBC, the Atlantic, oh my God, authoritarian Trump and his allies, his henchmen, they're doing what despots have done in the past. But when Democrats do it, it's completely above board. There's no evidence of bias at all. We didn't dispatch anyone. And the DOJ official just decided on his own to go work in New York. That we don't tell any state Democrats to indict Trump. They did so because of the rule of law.
Matthew Colangelo became the Assistant Attorney General at the very beginning of the Biden administration. Without having been Senate confirmed, goes and gets the senior role at the DOJ. And then after, I believe it's Gupta replaces Colangelo, Colangelo makes this remarkable downstream career journey from the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., and then pops up in Alvin Bragg's office to go get Trump. And you're saying that's just a career choice that was made that has nothing to do with the lawfare coordinated by the DOJ.
I'm saying it's false. I did not dispatch Mr. Colangelo anywhere.
Well,
he wasn't dispatched. On his own, he decided to work in New York to imprison Trump.
Do you know how he ended up there?
I assume he applied for a job there and got the job.
But see, you know what?
I can tell you I had nothing
He applied for a job. What's the problem?
to do with it.
Well, you might not have had anything to do with it, but we've got this contemporaneous evidence in Mr. Pomerantz's book. So Pomerantz writes this book, which I'm sure you're aware of, where he says, we put together the legal eagles to get Trump. We got all these folks together and we assembled them for that purpose. And so when we on the Judiciary Committee think about attacks on the judicial process, our concern is that the facts and the law aren't being followed. A target is acquired, here Trump, and then you assemble the legal talent from DOJ, Mr. Pomerantz, and you bring everybody in to get him. And meanwhile, the judge is making money on it. The judge is making money on it, or the judge's family is making money on it for stuff that you yourself wouldn't do. You know, no one's going to buy this. No one's going to believe it. It's going to create great disruption. And I am saddened by it because, like you, I have given my life to the law. I care deeply about the law. And I think that the lawfare we've seen against President Trump will do great damage well beyond our time in public service.
So if you're a morally superior liberal Democrat and you're laughing at this, he gave his life to the law. He wasn't charged with anything, genius. He wasn't charged. Like the ethics report wasn't written by Pam Bondi or Rudy Giuliani or anyone associated with Trump. It was written by Democrats. And you say, well, so what? The truth is the truth. Well, then why wasn't he convicted? The question is, why wasn't he convicted? Why wasn't Trump imprisoned? If these people are such criminals, you have even there's Kevin McCarthy in 2 seconds would testify to imprison Matt Gaetz forever on any charge. Well, where's the charge against? Even Biden's Department of Justice couldn't find enough evidence to charge Matt Gaetz. But that's the way Democrats work. They did it with Kavanaugh. Oh my God, it was a circus. And not one charge. You accuse Republicans or Kavanaugh or Gaetz or Trump of everything under the sun. And the second Biden is accused, the second others are accused of the same things, you say, well, that's not credible. But it's credible. Credibility is dependent to Democrats on whether or not the outcome furthers their political objectives. The accusations against Kavanaugh were credible. The accusations against Biden, not so credible. Against Clinton, not so credible. Against a whole endless list of Democrats. We can go on. It's like a hall of shame. And let's not even talk about Hollywood, the epicenter of immorality. You can list. We already know. I mean, we already know that any party associated with numerous Hollywood or music industry celebrities makes Matt Gaetz makes the allegations against Matt Gaetz, So it's like they're completely clueless. Hollywood, the music industry, the Democratic Party in D.C., they think that they're pristine. They get to judge and pontificate. It's like, look in the mirror. The entire planet knows that oftentimes you're the epicenter. These people are the epicenter of immorality, whereas Matt Gaetz or Trump or Kavanaugh or anyone who is accused, any Republican is accused of these crimes. There's no evidence. These are merely accusations. Where's the evidence? If you have some evidence, great. If you have some evidence, then charge Matt Gaetz. If you don't have evidence, all the allegations are worthless.
The gentleman, 5 minutes.
I guess I'm just wondering, Mr. Attorney General, Has anyone at the department told President Biden to knock it off with Hunter? I mean, you guys are charging Hunter Biden on some crimes, investigating him on others.
The thing with Hunter is that Joe had very likely bribery and graft on a laptop. It's very likely that the laptop that 50 intelligence officials lied through their teeth to protect had something to do with bribery and graft. Yet they went after Hunter on things that had nothing to do with the actual story. When the New York Post should have received numerous Pulitzer Prizes. Okay, Miranda Devine, one of the great journalists of this generation, really, she deserves numerous Pulitzer Prizes. Maybe she has already a Pulitzer Prize. She should. But where's the Pulitzer Prizes for the investigation of Hunter's laptop? Oh, that's right. Democrats and media work in lockstep. They don't want to know anything. We don't know. We don't even know the surface of a specific Hollywood director and a specific musical artist that's in the news now, that had parties, okay, that used to be in a duo with Biggie, who shall remain nameless. We don't even know the surface because Democrats, media won't investigate. It's like this. It's like the same team. Anyway, let's continue.
We got the president bringing Hunter Biden around to state dinners. Has anyone told him to knock it off?
Our job in the Justice Department is to pursue our cases without reference to what's happening in the outside world.
Just yes or no. Have you done that?
That is what we do.
So it's a no?
No one that I know of has spoken to the White House about the Hunter Biden case.
I'm wondering then.
Of course not.
Okay, I got it. So Hunter Biden is selling art to pay for his $15,000 a month rent in Malibu. How can you guarantee that the people buying that art aren't doing so to gain favor with the president?
The job of the Justice Department is to investigate criminal allegations. You have information.
Are you investigating this? I mean, someone who bought Hunter Biden's art ended up with a prestigious appointment to a federal position. Doesn't it look weird that he's become this immediate success in the art world as his dad is president of the United States? Isn't that odd?
I'm not going to comment about any specific.
Not going to comment, not going to investigate. So
right.
Hunter Biden associate Devin Archer told us that Hunter sold the appearance of access to then Vice President Biden. Are you confident he has stopped doing that?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Hunter Biden associate Devin Archer told us that Hunter sold the appearance of access to then Vice President Biden. Are you confident he has stopped?
The whole thing with Hunter and his laptop has nothing really to do with Hunter and his laptop. It's all about Joe Biden and Democrats. It's all about the president. Well, I mean, the current president. We'll assume that Harris isn't, or all the advisors around Biden aren't, deciding things. The story is about possible bribery and graft. That's what the story is about. It's not about tax issues. It's not about, anything to do with Hunter Biden's, Second Amendment thing. It's about potential bribery and graft. And you see how good Matt Gaetz is. Imagine if the Republican Party was like this for 8 years. You wouldn't have the absurd, nonsensical hoax that said, Trump was a Kremlin operative. You wouldn't have any of that stuff.
I'm going to say again that all these matters are within the purview of Mr. Weiss. I have not interfered with them, and I do not.
If you were confident that he had stopped, you could.
And I do not intend to interfere with him.
So it was a lot of Chinese money that was working its way through these shell companies into the accounts of the Biden family. So the China initiative was set up during the Trump administration at the Department of Justice to go after the malign influence of the Chinese Communist Party. And the Biden Justice Department dissolved the China initiative. So I guess I'm wondering, does the department have any documents that would detail the basis for why you got rid of the China initiative that President Trump had set up.
The Assistant Attorney General for the National Security Division gave a long speech which explained that. He has testified before Congress several times. We'd be happy to provide you with.
What's the basis? Just tell us all now. Why was the China initiative dissolved?
What the Assistant Attorney General said was that we face attacks from 4 nation states: North Korea, China, Russia, and Iran, and that we need to focus our attention on the broad range of these attacks. So,
well, you can put 2 and 2 together there. We'll end this with the legal cases against Trump completely, dissolving.
Barr saying all prosecutors should dismiss their cases against the president-elect. Listen.
I think the president really is going to have any legal problems going forward. These cases are not going to go forward, neither the federal cases nor the state cases against the president. So I think it's really a question of how these governments, the federal government, the Justice Department, is going to dismount from the limb it's gotten itself out on.
Katie Cherkasky is a constitutional law attorney, former federal prosecutor, joins me now. Chanley did a really good synopsis of what's going on. Let's start with the Fed cases. We have documents. We have election interference. Chanley mentioned that DOJ longstanding policy, a sitting president cannot be prosecuted. That phrase, wind down Jack Smith's case. Describe what a wind down of Jack Smith's cases looks like.
Well, I think big picture here, if you haven't been able to convict someone in the court of public opinion, there's really no legitimate way you can convict them in a court of law. And every prosecutor has discretion about what cases they bring forward. These cases, we've called them lawfare, and that's because they're cases that have stretched the bounds of any prior precedent. They're never before seen interpretations of criminal law. So in terms of winding down these cases, they essentially can dismiss them really at any time, or obviously when Donald Trump takes office, he will dismiss the cases and summarily fire Jack Smith. So there's many different ways that the cases could end. They're not practically going to trial anytime soon, even if Trump had lost. But at this point, I do agree that they need to be concluded.
So the takeaway on the Fed cases, they're done, finito, over. Then there is the New York State Court case. All focus now goes there. This is the Stormy Daniels case. He's got sentencing less than 3 weeks from now. What happens there?
Well, that case also is complicated because of the Supreme Court's ruling regarding immunity. So essentially, there is sentencing scheduled, but before that can even proceed, Judge Merchan is expected to rule on whether that case actually is tainted by the immunity ruling, meaning that they allowed in inadmissible evidence and that the case would essentially have to be reversed and go back to trial, or ultimately go back up to the Supreme Court to determine whether the immunity ruling impacted it. So for all intents and purposes, again, that case could also be dismissed, but it doesn't have to be. If there is any adverse ruling to President Trump, it's immediately appealable, meaning that if Judge Merchan says the immunity case does not end that case summarily, that would be essentially appealed anyway. And then, of course, I guess he could sentence him at some point to jail time, again, something that would be immediately appealable and probably stayed pending a decision by the higher court. So for all practical purposes, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. The question is how far these people will continue to push these cases.
There's also the logic of...
And so if they tried to continue, the case is not going to go anywhere because there are too many conflicts of interest the court has. But if they continued with, Jose, thank you to my super chat. Jose, thank you so very much. If they continued with that case, it would go to the Supreme Court. And because it was a state deciding on a federal statute, they would say, okay, well, the state had no right. It was unconstitutional for the state of New York to decide on a federal statute. The FEC did not level any charge against Trump or any fine. Hit subscribe to this channel, ladies and gentlemen. Jesse Waters suggests a special prosecutor role for Matt Gaetz. He will be part of the team, whether it's a special counsel, probably be a special prosecutor within a special counsel. Hit subscribe to this channel, to my super chat. Thank you so very, very, very much. And it's a completely new ball game, people. A completely new ball game. Thank you so very much. See you tomorrow. The second Trump term will see numerous special counsels, numerous indictments, almost certainly some serious convictions, because it's almost certain that people broke the law in trying to set up and frame Trump. Give me your thoughts. Hit subscribe. Thank you so very much. Have a great evening.